The scream rose from the ocean, sharp and unnatural, slicing through the storm that battered the cliffs of Raven Ridge. Inside the glass mansion that crowned the coastline, billionaire Adrian Cole froze at the window. Lightning flared, flashing across his reflection, and for an instant he looked older, almost hollow. The waves below hit the rocks like a drum beat. He listened without blinking, his thoughts pulled back to a night he'd spent years trying to forget. Down the long corridor, a lullaby toy played a broken melody, then fell silent. 6-year-old Mira sat near her window, still as glass, her small hands resting on a stuffed bear's head. Everyone said she was blind from birth, but the way her chin tilted toward the light made Adrian uneasy. She never spoke. She never cried. And yet, he could feel her watching in some impossible way. Earlier that afternoon, a new maid had arrived from Atlanta. Amara Blake, 29, soft-spoken and precise. Her resume had looked ordinary, domestic work, hospice care. But there was quiet strength in her eyes, the kind that comes only after loss. The agency had praised her patience. They hadn't mentioned the tiny grave she'd left behind or the way she still woke at night to phantom cries. Raven Ridge felt nothing like home. It was silent, orderly, almost sterile. Marble floors stretched through hallways that echoed like cathedrals. The house smelled of salt, lemon polish, and grief. Amara worked carefully, learning each turn and shadow, until she reached the last door upstairs. Mira's door. It was slightly open. Lightning flashed again. The child's pale face gleamed for half a second, and her eyes twitched. Just once. But Amara saw it. Her heart skipped. Miss Blake. Adrian's voice startled her. He stood in the hallway, broad-shouldered, expression unreadable. "We keep the curtains drawn," he said. "Too much light overwhelms her." "Yes, sir." He studied her, tired eyes carrying the weight of 5 years without his wife. "I don't want people filling her head with miracles," he said quietly. "Hope can hurt worse than blindness." "I understand," Amara replied, but she didn't. When he left, she lingered. The lighthouse at Grey Watch swept its white beam across the cliffs. The light passed through the window and brushed across Mira's face. Her eyelids fluttered once, twice, and then she turned her chin toward it. Amara's pulse hammered. "Mira," she whispered. The girl didn't answer, but her lips parted slightly, her eyes trembling under their veil of gray. Amara knelt, whispering again, but the beam faded, and the moment was gone. That night, in the staff quarters, Amara couldn't let it go. She opened a small notebook and wrote, "The child reacts to light." Then she crossed it out, telling herself it was imagination, a trick of lightning, nothing more. Upstairs, Adrian sat in his study, watching rain streak the windows. He poured himself whiskey and didn't drink it. People called him a visionary, a man who built empires out of steel and sea roots. But what good was vision when your daughter saw nothing? He stared at the family portrait on his desk, his late wife smiling beside the baby they'd believed was perfect, and whispered, "I'm still trying." In her room, Mira traced a finger along the window pane where the light had touched. Her pupils moved again, faint, uncertain, as if chasing something only she could sense. Amara lay awake, listening to the waves crash below. She thought about the child's face, the tremor of those eyes. The world had dismissed her as just a maid. But she knew what she'd seen. And if she was right, every secret in this house was about to unravel. Outside, the lighthouse turned again, casting its beam through the fog. It brushed across two restless souls, one blind, one broken, both about to see far more than they were meant to. Morning came with a cold stillness, the kind that followed every storm along the cliffs of Raven Ridge. The mansion glimmered under a pale sun, its walls spotless, its silence complete. But Amara Blake couldn't shake what she'd seen the night before. The faint twitch in the blind girl's eyes when the lighthouse beam crossed her face. It wasn't her imagination. She was sure of it. By 8, the house had settled into its rhythm. The gardener trimmed the roses no one touched. The chef prepared breakfast for 2 who barely ate. And Adrian Cole locked himself in his office, voice clipped and commanding. "I want the shipment cleared before sunset," he said into the phone, pacing. Control was his only religion. Every detail of his empire bent to his will, except for the fragile life upstairs. When Amara entered Mira's room to change the linens, the curtains were half open, letting a slice of morning spill across the floor. Mira sat beside it, her head tilted toward the light, fingers stretched as if she could feel warmth in the air. "Good morning, Miss Mira," Amara said softly. No answer. Only the faint rustle of fabric as the girl turned slightly toward the brightness. Amara began to dust the shelves, her movements careful, her mind racing. She reached for her phone, the flashlight flicking on by accident. The narrow beam cut through the dimness and landed on the far wall. Mira's pupils shifted. Then, with a small breath, she reached toward it. Amara's pulse jumped. "Mira, can you feel that?" The girl's lips moved. Her voice, thin and unsure, slipped into the air. "Warm." Amara froze. "Warm?" she whispered again, but the moment broke. The girl's hands fell, and her face emptied of expression. The door opened behind them. "Miss Blake." Adrian stood in the doorway, his presence heavy. In his hand was a silver tray with a small bottle. "She takes her drops now," he said. His tone was calm but final. Amara tucked her phone away. "Yes, sir." He crossed to his daughter and crouched beside her. "Eyes open, sweetheart. 2 drops, 1 for each eye." Mira blinked once, twice, then stilled. The spark Amara had just seen vanished completely. When Adrian left, she stared at the bottle on the dresser. The label read, "Dr. Lucian Harrow, use daily." The liquid inside glowed faintly amber. At noon, the housekeeper Eliza Ward cornered her in the kitchen. "You're new?" Eliza said with an edge. "Learn fast. Don't question the doctor or his orders." The last girl did, and she didn't last 48 hours. "I understand," Amara said, though her heart raced. Eliza gave a thin smile. "Good. Keep your head down." That evening, Amara returned to Mira's room under the excuse of cleaning. The girl was asleep on the rug, teddy bear in her arms. The medicine bottle sat uncapped on the dresser. Amara picked it up, studying the faded print. The smell was sharp, chemical, not like anything she knew. Outside, the beam from Graywatch Lighthouse swept across the cliffs again. It slid through the glass, washing over Mira's face. The girl stirred, her lashes trembling. "Light," she whispered, barely audible. Amara froze. The word hit her like a wave. She stepped closer, kneeling beside the child. For the briefest second, she saw the faintest flicker of awareness behind those pale gray eyes. "Light," Mira said again, softer this time, then went still. Amara's throat tightened. Whatever was happening in this house wasn't what it seemed. She looked toward the sea and made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, no matter who tried to keep it hidden. By the 3rd morning, Raven Ridge Mansion looked calm again. But Amara Blake's thoughts were anything but. Every creak of the floor reminded her of the whisper she'd heard. Mira's fragile voice saying one impossible word. Light. It echoed in her mind, like a secret she wasn't meant to keep. She tried to work as usual, folding linens, polishing silver, avoiding eye contact with anyone. But her focus always drifted toward the child's room at the end of the hall. The mansion functioned like a well-oiled machine. The staff moved quietly, almost invisibly. The gardener trimmed the hedges without humming. The cook prepared breakfast for 2 people who barely ate. Only Adrian Cole's voice broke the silence, calm but commanding, echoing down the corridors whenever he spoke. That morning, Amara entered his study with fresh sheets. He sat behind a massive oak desk, eyes on his computer screen. "Leave them there," he said. "Yes, sir." As she turned, her gaze caught a photograph on the shelf, a woman with curly hair holding a baby by the sea, both smiling, caught in a gust of sunlight. The frame was cracked, Adrian noticed. "My wife," he said flatly. "Evelyn. She died when Mira was a week old." Amara lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, distant. "I built this house for her. Now it's just noise and storms." His voice softened, but only for a moment. "Keep things quiet for Mira. That's all I ask." Later, in the laundry room, the housekeeper Eliza Ward folded towels with military precision. "You're adjusting," Eliza said without looking up. "But keep your curiosity to yourself. Mr. Cole doesn't like questions." "I only want to help the girl," Amara replied carefully. "Then follow the doctor's routine and don't overstep," Eliza said. Her tone sharpened. The last maid thought she could help. She lasted 2 days. The warning hung heavy in the air. That evening, wind from the Pacific swept through the windows, carrying a smell of salt and iron. Amara moved down the hallway, pretending to check locks. She passed a brass-plated door she hadn't seen before, medical storage. She paused. The handle was locked, but faintly she heard bottles clinking inside. Before she could linger, footsteps echoed behind her. Adrian's. She stepped away quickly and returned to her room, heart pounding. A few hours later, she found herself back in Mira's room under the excuse of cleaning. The girl was awake, sitting on the rug, humming softly to her stuffed bear. "That's a nice song," Amara said gently. "Mommy sang it," Mira murmured. Amara froze. "You remember that?" The child's head tilted. Only the sound. It was the most she'd spoken since Amara arrived. Hope flared inside her chest, small but fierce. As she wiped the dresser, the cloth caught on a drawer handle. It slid open to reveal a neat row of identical medicine bottles. Each label bore the same name, Dr. Lucien Harrow. Dozens of bottles, some full, others empty. She picked one up. The cap was sticky, the scent sharp, chemical. Her pulse quickened. No child needed this much medicine. She replaced the bottle just as footsteps passed in the corridor. That night, Amara lay in bed listening to the ocean crash against the cliffs. She couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was watching her, holding its breath, waiting. Somewhere below, waves thundered like a warning. She whispered into the dark, "What are you hiding, Mr. Cole?" Outside, the lighthouse beam turned again, slicing through the fog, its light brushing across her window like a promise and a threat. The next morning broke under a soft gray mist, the kind that blurred the horizon until the ocean and sky became one. Amara Blake moved through the mansion with a quiet purpose. Her mind still tangled in the memory of what she'd found, the drawer full of medicine bottles, all marked with the same doctor's name. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Why would a 6-year-old need so many? And why did her father keep them hidden? When Amara entered Mira's room, the child was awake, sitting cross-legged on the rug, humming faintly. The tune was low and uncertain, almost like a memory struggling to be remembered. Amara paused, listening. "That's a pretty song," she said softly. Mira tilted her head toward the voice. Mommy sang it. The words came out small but sure. Amara knelt beside her. "You remember her?" The girl's fingers traced the ear of her teddy bear. Just her voice. Before Amara could speak again, a knock startled her. Adrian Cole stood in the doorway, dressed in a gray suit, his jaw tight. "Miss Blake, I'm heading into the city. You'll keep to the schedule. 2 drops for each eye, after lunch." "Yes, sir." He lingered a moment, watching the child. "If she cries, let her. It means the nerves still react." When he left, the air felt heavier. Amara waited until she heard his car fade down the cliff road before she moved. She picked up the small bottle on the dresser, turning it in her hand. The liquid shimmered amber under the light. She read the name again. Dr. Lucien Harrow. At noon, when she sat beside Mira for lunch, the girl reached toward the window where sunlight bled through the curtains. "Bright," she whispered. Amara's pulse quickened. "Do you see it?" "Not see," the girl murmured. "Feel." Amara hesitated, then quietly slid the medicine bottle aside. "Not today," she said under her breath. Instead, she picked up a flashlight from her apron pocket, the same one she'd used before. She turned it on, sweeping it gently across the table. Mira's pupils twitched, following the movement. Amara's heart leapt. "That's right," she whispered. "Follow the light." Mira smiled faintly, her fingers reaching for the beam as if to catch it. The moment was fragile, magical, and it shattered with the creak of the door. Eliza Ward stood there, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" Amara switched off the flashlight. "Just playing." Eliza's gaze darted to the untouched medicine. "She hasn't had her drops. I was about to give them." The older woman stepped closer, her tone sharp. "Routine exists for a reason. Don't test Mr. Cole's patience." She snatched the bottle, shook it once, and forced 2 drops into the girl's eyes. Mira blinked, whimpered, and went limp against the chair. Amara clenched her fists, fury rising behind her calm face. When Eliza left, she knelt beside the child, whispering, "It's all right, baby. I promise." That night, the fog rolled in from the sea, swallowing the cliffs. Adrian hadn't returned. The house was silent except for the rhythmic pulse of the lighthouse. Amara sat awake by the window, notebook open, writing every detail, the reactions, the light, the effect of the drops. At the bottom of the page, she wrote, "She feels the light. The medicine stops it." For the first time since coming to Raven Ridge, she felt sure of something. Outside, the lighthouse beam swept through the mist, brushing the mansion's walls. It touched the window where Amara sat, and in the next room, Mira stirred in her sleep, her small hand reaching toward the glow she couldn't name. 2 souls, 1 secret, and a light that refused to die. Rain fell in thin silver lines over the cliffs of Raven Ridge the next morning, washing the mansion in a dull sheen. The ocean below roared like something restless and alive. Amara Blake woke before dawn, her head full of questions that refused to sleep. Every instinct told her something was wrong with those eye drops, the amber liquid, the way Mira's eyes dulled after each dose, the silence that always followed. She dressed quickly, tying her hair back, and moved through the hall with her notebook tucked under her arm. In the kitchen, Eliza Ward was already awake, stirring oatmeal with the same stiff precision she used for everything. "You're up early?" she said without turning. "I couldn't sleep," Amara replied. "Storm kept you up?" "No," Amara said softly. "Something else." Eliza gave her a long look, then went back to her pot. "You're thinking too much. This house runs better when people don't." After breakfast, Adrian Cole left for meetings in Portland. The sound of his car tires faded along the cliff road, leaving the mansion in uneasy quiet. Amara waited until the staff dispersed before heading upstairs. She slipped into Mira's room and found the girl sitting on the rug, building a tower of wooden blocks. "Good morning, sunshine," Amara said. Mira smiled faintly. "It's raining." Amara knelt beside her. "How do you know? I can hear it." The girl paused, turning her head slightly. "And the light feels sleepy." Amara froze. "Sleepy?" Mira nodded, her small hands pressing against her eyes. "It goes away when the bottle comes." The words hit Amara like a slap. "Who told you that?" Mira frowned. "Nobody. It just does." That was enough. Amara opened her notebook and wrote the sentence exactly as the child had said it. Then she crossed to the dresser and picked up the latest bottle. The label read, "Dr. Lucian Harrow, Compound B12, Ophthalmic Use Only." She twisted the cap carefully and sniffed. The smell was sharp, metallic, not like any medicine she'd ever handled. She placed 2 drops on a piece of tissue. The liquid stained it amber, then dried into a faint crust. Her stomach turned. That afternoon, she waited until Eliza went to town for supplies. Then she slipped into the locked medical storage room using a spare key she'd found behind the linen cabinet. The air inside was cold, the lights dim. Shelves lined the walls, each filled with bottles identical to the ones in Mira's room. At the far end, she found a folder labeled Patient M. Cole. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were charts, prescriptions, and handwritten notes. Most were signed by Dr. Harrow, the same man on every bottle. One note read, "Continue regimen. Maintain suppression of optic response to prevent overstimulation." Another said, "Renew monthly under father's consent." "Suppression," Amara whispered. Her stomach clenched. These drops weren't healing Mira's eyes. They were silencing them. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. She froze, holding her breath. The steps passed, fading down the corridor. She waited another minute before slipping out, heart pounding. Back in Mira's room, she found the girl asleep. The bottle sat on the table, untouched. Amara stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "Not anymore." She took it and hid it deep in her apron pocket. That night, she sat at her desk, copying the doctor's notes into her journal. Outside, the wind howled through the cliffs, but she barely heard it. The truth was beginning to take shape, terrifying and undeniable. In the room next door, Mira stirred in her sleep, murmuring something soft and strange. Amara leaned against the wall, listening through the silence. The girl whispered one word again, dreamlike, certain, light. The next day began with a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls. The storm had passed, leaving behind a bright, cloudless sky. The sea below Raven Ridge was calm, almost deceptively calm. Amara Blake stood by the kitchen window, sunlight washing over her face, and wondered how truth could hide so easily behind beauty. She had spent half the night rereading the notes she'd copied from Dr. Lucian Harrow's file. The words swirled through her mind: suppression, optic response, consent. She couldn't stop thinking about them. Adrian Cole believed he was protecting his daughter. But from what? Hope or the truth? By late morning, Adrian had gone to town, and Eliza was busy with the laundry. Amara finally had the house to herself. She slipped upstairs, heart hammering. Mira sat on the rug, stacking her wooden blocks in a perfect line. "Good morning, Mira," Amara whispered. The girl looked up, her gray eyes faintly reflective in the light. "You're quiet today." "I was thinking," Amara said. "Would you like to play a game?" Mira nodded slowly. Amara reached into her apron and pulled out the flashlight. Her hand trembled slightly. "We'll play follow the light, all right? You just tell me if you feel something." She turned on the beam and moved it gently across the carpet. Mira's eyes followed, pupils twitching like tiny compass needles. "What do you feel?" Amara asked softly. The child smiled, a small, uncertain smile. "It moves. I feel it." The words came like a miracle. Amara's eyes filled with tears. "You can see it, can't you?" Before she could say more, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Adrian's voice cut through the air. "Mira?" Amara froze. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. She turned off the flashlight, but the sound of the switch was too late. Adrian stepped into the doorway, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" "Nothing, sir," she said quickly. "We were playing." With that, he snatched the flashlight from her hand. "I told you she's light-sensitive. Are you trying to hurt her?" "No," Amara said, trembling. She was responding. Enough." His tone was sharp enough to cut through the air. "Get out." Mira startled, her small hands clutching the edge of her bear. "Daddy, don't." Adrian froze. She hadn't spoken to him in weeks. He knelt beside her. "What did you say, sweetheart?" The girl looked up at him, tears trembling on her lashes. "She helps me see." For a long moment, the room went still. Adrian's face shifted from anger to disbelief. He looked at Amara, then back at his daughter. "What did you just say?" he whispered. "I saw a light," Mira murmured, touching her chest. "Right here." Amara's throat tightened. She wanted to explain, but no words came. Adrian stood slowly, the fury drained from his face, replaced by something heavier, fear. "Leave us," he said quietly. Amara hesitated. "Sir." "Now." She obeyed, but before closing the door, she saw him pick up the bottle of eye drops from the dresser. He stared at it, his hand trembling, then set it aside without using it. Hours later, Amara stood by her window, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew something inside that house had shifted. Upstairs, Adrian sat beside his daughter as she traced her fingers across his hand, whispering, "Light." And for the first time in years, he whispered back, "I believe you." Outside, the lighthouse turned once more, its beams sweeping across the cliffs like an answered prayer. The house felt different the next morning, lighter somehow. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows that had once stayed closed, filling the corridors with warmth instead of shadows. Amara Blake could sense the shift in every breath she took. Adrian Cole had not spoken to her since yesterday's confrontation, but she knew he hadn't given Mira the drops last night. Something inside him had cracked open. When Amara stepped into Mira's room, the girl was sitting by the window again, her face turned toward the morning light. No one had drawn the curtains. For the first time, the room looked alive. "Good morning, sweetheart," Amara said softly. Mira turned toward the sound. Her eyes, once dull and clouded, glimmered faintly. "It's bright today," she whispered. Amara smiled, her heart pounding. "Yes, it is." At breakfast, Adrian sat at the head of the long dining table, unreadable. He stirred his coffee without speaking. Mira sat beside him, tracing the edge of her plate with small, curious fingers. "Daddy," she said suddenly, "what color's the sky?" Adrian froze. She'd never asked about colors before. He swallowed hard. "It's blue, sweetheart." "Blue," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Blue feels happy." Amara watched from across the room, trying not to cry. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of something new, hope. Later, Adrian asked to speak with her in the study. He stood by the window, the sea gleaming behind him. "You think the medicine caused this?" he said. "I don't think, sir." "I know," Amara replied, her voice calm but steady. The drops were suppressing her vision. She was never fully blind. He turned toward her slowly. "How could something like that happen?" "I trusted the doctors." "Trust can be dangerous," she said gently, "especially when you stop asking questions." Adrian said nothing. His gaze drifted toward the waves below, and for a moment, he looked lost. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet," she admitted, "but I will." That afternoon, she began small exercises with Mira. Games of light and shadow, sound and touch. She opened the curtains wide and let the sunlight fill the room. She held up a yellow ball and whispered, "Follow this." Mira squinted, her eyes trembling with effort. "It's round," she said softly. "Yes," Amara encouraged, her voice trembling. "It's round." Every day that week, they repeated the games. Each morning, Mira's reactions grew stronger. She followed light with her eyes, recognized simple shapes, and even began to smile when colors were named. Adrian watched quietly, standing at the doorway each time, his disbelief turning slowly into awe. The walls that had once held grief now echoed with small laughter. One evening, as the sun set over the Pacific, Mira sat by the window again, tracing the pink-gold glow in the sky. "Daddy," she said, "is that color happy too?" Adrian knelt beside her, his voice breaking. "That one's called sunset. It means the day is ending, but something new is coming." Mira leaned against him. "Then I like sunset best." Amara stood in the doorway, her chest tight. She knew what she was witnessing was more than recovery. It was resurrection. That night, the mansion no longer felt like a tomb. The sea below no longer sounded like mourning. Instead, every wave carried a promise. Upstairs, Adrian whispered a prayer of gratitude he hadn't spoken in years. And Amara wrote one line in her notebook before turning out the light. "Hope is returning." Outside, the lighthouse beam swept once more across the cliffs, brushing the windows of the house that had finally begun to breathe again. Days passed, and the change in Raven Ridge became impossible to ignore. The mansion, once heavy with grief, now pulsed with quiet life. Mira laughed softly when the sunlight hit her face, and Adrian Cole, who had once avoided his own reflection, found himself standing longer in the light. For the first time in 6 years, hope walked these halls. Yet for Amara Blake, hope was not enough. She needed proof. Each morning, she tested Mira's sight through small games. "Which one moves, sweetheart?" she asked, rolling 2 balls across the carpet, one blue, one red. Mira pointed at the blue. "It's faster," she said, smiling. Adrian watched silently from the doorway, his eyes shining with disbelief. "You're certain?" he whispered to Amara later. "She's responding consistently," Amara said. "But until we know what's in those drops, we're only guessing." That evening, after dinner, Amara waited until Adrian had gone to his office. She slipped into the storage room again, flashlight trembling in her hand. The air smelled faintly of medicine and salt. On the back shelf, she found a newer box labeled Compound B12 for Ocular Therapy, Dr. Lucien Harrow. She placed one bottle in her pocket and quietly left. The next day, she drove into the nearby town under the excuse of running errands. She parked by the small hospital and found a familiar name on the staff board, Dr. Naomi Keller, an old classmate from her nursing program. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly above their heads. "Amara Blake," Naomi said in surprise. "It's been years. What brings you here?" "I need help," Amara said, handing over the bottle. "This was prescribed to a child. Can you test it? I think something's wrong." Naomi frowned. "It looks pharmaceutical, but the label's odd. I'll run it quietly, all right?" "Please," Amara whispered. "Don't put my name on anything." 2 days later, Naomi called her back. "You were right," she said. "This formula isn't safe for children. It's a high-dosage compound meant for temporary pupil restriction, maybe even suppression. Long-term use could limit light response entirely." "Who's been using this?" Amara's blood ran cold. "A little girl. The doctor's name is Lucien Harrow." There was silence on the line. "That name's familiar," Naomi said cautiously. "He lost his license years ago after a malpractice investigation. Something about experimental treatments." "Be careful, Amara. If he's still practicing, it's off the books." That night, Amara returned to Raven Ridge with the lab report folded in her apron. She found Adrian in the study, staring at a photo of his late wife. "You said you trusted Dr. Harrow?" she asked gently. "He treated Evelyn's migraines," Adrian said. "After she died, he offered to monitor Mira's condition. He said her blindness was congenital." I believed him. Amara placed the report on the desk. He lied. Adrian read it slowly. His hand began to tremble halfway down the page. "He did this to her?" "Yes. Those drops didn't protect her. They blinded her." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his voice broke. "I followed his instructions for years. I made her worse." "You didn't know," Amara said softly. "But now we do." Adrian turned toward the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. "Then we find him, and we stop him." Amara nodded. "We will." Outside, the ocean roared beneath the cliffs as if echoing their vow. Upstairs, Mira slept peacefully, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. The lighthouse turned its beam across the waves, slicing through the darkness like the truth finally breaking through. The news about Dr. Lucien Harrow spread through the mansion like a storm no one could contain. Adrian Cole hadn't left his study in 2 days. Every drawer, every folder on his desk was open, filled with years of medical records he'd trusted without question. Each signature from Harrow felt like a knife. Meanwhile, Amara Blake spent her nights writing detailed notes, piecing together the truth like shards of broken glass. On the 3rd evening, Adrian called her in. His voice was rough from lack of sleep. "I contacted the medical board," he said. "They confirmed Harrow's license was suspended years ago. He shouldn't have been practicing at all." Amara's jaw tightened. "Then how did he keep sending prescriptions?" "He used private contracts," Adrian replied. "The Cole Foundation funded a small research branch years ago, one he managed. I thought it was for child development. Now I realize he used my own money to hide his work." The words hung in the air like a confession. Amara stepped closer. "We can still fix this. Go public. Tell the truth." Adrian shook his head. "It's not that simple. If we expose him, the company, the foundation, they'll all be dragged down with him. Then let them fall, Amara said fiercely. You built empires, Mr. Cole. You can build again. But this is your daughter's life. Her voice cut through his defenses. He looked at her for a long time, then finally nodded. You're right. We'll do it your way. The next morning, they met with a local journalist Adrian trusted, a woman named Rebecca Hale. She listened carefully as Amara laid out the evidence. The medicine bottles, the lab report, the patient files. Rebecca's eyes widened. If this is true, it's more than malpractice, she said. It's criminal experimentation. Can you prove it? Adrian asked. I can try, Rebecca said. But once this story breaks, you'll both have targets on your backs. Harrow won't stay quiet. That warning became prophecy within days. The first sign came in an email to Adrian's office, an anonymous message filled with accusations. It claimed he'd ignored medical advice, that he'd forced unapproved treatments on his child. The next morning, a story appeared online with his photo under the headline, Wealthy Father Endangers Daughter's Health. Adrian's face went pale as he read. He's trying to bury us before the truth gets out. Amara clenched her fists. Then we fight louder. But things escalated quickly. Late that night, Amara's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. She showed it to Adrian. His expression hardened. He's desperate. Yes, she said quietly. And that means we're close. They met Rebecca again 2 days later in a small diner far from the city. She had new documents, bank statements, hidden contracts linking Harrow to a pharmaceutical company that funded ocular trials. Payments traced directly to accounts once managed by the Cole Foundation. Adrian stared at the papers in disbelief. He used my company to hurt children. Rebecca nodded grimly. And if this gets out, he'll try anything to silence you. Amara looked at Adrian. Then we move fast. We tell the world before he can twist it again. He met her gaze and said, Tomorrow. That night, the mansion was quiet except for the hum of the wind. Mira slept peacefully upstairs, unaware of the war raging below her name. Amara stood by the window, watching the lighthouse beam cut through the darkness. She thought of every lie, every tear, every drop of poison disguised as care. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Change was coming, and this time, it wouldn't be quiet. The storm broke before dawn. Rain battered the glass walls of Raven Ridge as if the ocean itself wanted to be heard. Adrian Cole hadn't slept. He sat in his study surrounded by folders, phone calls, and a single burning question. How many children had suffered because of his trust? By morning, Rebecca Hale's report was ready. It would go live at noon. Amara Blake stood beside him as the journalist confirmed the upload. Once this goes public, Rebecca warned, there's no going back. Adrian's jaw tightened. Good. The truth shouldn't hide behind money. At exactly 12, the story hit every major outlet. Suspended doctor tied to illegal drug trials on children. It included Harrow's signed prescriptions, financial links to the Cole Foundation, and proof of the falsified diagnosis that blinded Mira Cole. Within hours, the mansion's phones exploded with calls. Some offered support, others threatened lawsuits. Harrow vanished. His clinic closed overnight, staff gone, records deleted. But by evening, reporters were parked outside the mansion gates, cameras flashing whenever a curtain moved. Amara kept Amira's room, protecting the girl from the noise. Are they mad at Daddy? Mira asked softly. No, sweetheart, Amara said. They're mad at someone who lied. The child nodded slowly. then touched the light spilling through the window. It doesn't hurt anymore. Her words steadied Amara's heart. Whatever chaos swirled outside, progress inside this room was real. Downstairs, Adrian faced the fallout. His board demanded answers, his lawyers warned of damage to his empire. "You'll lose everything," one said. "Then I lose it," Adrian replied. "But I won't lose my daughter again." That night, he appeared on live television beside Rebecca, holding the lab report in his hand. "I was deceived," he said, voice trembling but clear. "My child's blindness was manufactured for profit. I can't undo the years stolen from her, but I can make sure it never happens again." The confession spread faster than the scandal. Hashtags flooded social media. "Justice for Mira. Stop the trials." Parents began sharing stories of similar treatments. Within 48 hours, other families came forward. 3, then 6, then more. All had been told the same lie by the same man. Meanwhile, Amara received new messages, this time from mothers thanking her for speaking up. One wrote, "You gave my son a chance to be seen again." But Harrow wasn't done. The third night after the report, Adrian received another email. "You don't understand what you've started. There are people who will make you pay." It was unsigned, but attached was a photo. Amara outside the hospital with Naomi Keller. Adrian's stomach dropped. "They're watching you." "I'm not scared," Amara said. "They can't silence all of us now." The next morning, federal investigators arrived. They seized files from the Cole Foundation, subpoenaed the pharmaceutical company, and began tracing Harrow's accounts. The evidence was undeniable. Harrow had conducted unauthorized trials on children using compounds that chemically dulled vision. He'd hidden behind corporate funding and a father's grief. By the end of the week, headlines changed tone. "Whistleblower Billionaire exposes corrupt medical network." Adrian's reputation began to rebuild, not as a tycoon, but as a father who chose truth over power. At Raven Ridge, peace slowly returned. Mira's therapy continued. She recognized colors now: blue, yellow, pink. When Adrian asked which one she loved most, she said, "Yellow. It feels like warm hands." Amara stood at the window that evening, watching the lighthouse sweep across the dark horizon. Adrian joined her quietly. "I thought light was something you see," he said. "Turns out it's something you fight for." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "And something you protect." Outside, the rain stopped. The sea calmed. The world finally began to listen. The rain stopped the next morning, but tension hung over Raven Ridge like a storm that refused to leave. The mansion's gates were crowded with reporters, microphones flashing through the mist. Inside, Adrian Cole stood at the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. For the first time in years, he felt both exposed and free. The truth was out, and so was everything he'd tried to hide. Rebecca Hale's article had detonated across the country. "Suspended Dr. Blind's children for profit." Funded by Billionaire Adrian Cole's foundation. The headline burned through every network. Some called him a hero for speaking out. Others branded him reckless. The public didn't know that it was Amara Blake, the maid everyone ignored, who had lit the first spark. She spent the morning keeping Mira calm while cameras clicked outside. "Why are there people at the gate?" the child asked softly. "They're here because they finally know what happened," Amara said. "They're listening to your story." Mira touched her hand. "Does that mean the light wins?" Amara smiled faintly. "It always does. But sometimes it fights first." Downstairs, Adrian faced his board of directors in a video meeting. The men on the screen were polished and afraid. "You've destroyed the Foundation's reputation," one snapped. "We'll lose donors, partners, everything." Adrian leaned forward. "Then we rebuild with truth instead of lies. I funded a monster. I won't hide that." When the call ended, he found Amara waiting by the study door. "They'll turn on you," she warned. "Let them," he said. "I've spent too long protecting the wrong people." By noon, the FBI arrived with search warrants. Agents in dark suits combed through the Foundation's documents. Amara stood beside Adrian as they carried out boxes of files stamped with Harrow's name. One agent turned to Adrian. "You did the right thing coming forward, sir. This will help us shut him down." For the first time, Adrian's shoulders eased. "Just find him," he said quietly. "Find the man who took my daughter's sight." That night, the news aired live footage of Harrow's abandoned clinic. Rusted cabinets, shattered glass, files left behind. One folder bore the initials MC. It was Mira Cole. Adrian turned off the TV and sat in silence. Amara entered the room, holding tea. "He's running," she said. "He can run," Adrian replied. "But he can't hide from this." She sat across from him. "You know, when I came here, I thought I was just cleaning floors. I never imagined I'd help start a war." Adrian looked at her, gratitude softening his voice. "You didn't start a war, Amara. You ended one." Upstairs, Mira was awake, coloring with her new set of crayons. She'd begun naming shades she could now distinguish. "Yellow," she whispered, pointing to the sun drawn on her page. "It feels warm." When Adrian joined her, she lifted the picture proudly. "Do you like it, Daddy?" He knelt beside her, emotion tightening his throat. "I love it, sweetheart. You can see it now." She nodded, her small smile glowing. "Because she showed me how." Adrian turned toward the doorway, where Amara stood quietly, her eyes glistening. For a brief moment, the mansion felt alive again, no longer haunted, but reborn. Outside, the wind calmed. The lighthouse beam swept once more across the cliffs, touching the house that had finally opened its windows to the world. Later that night, Amara sat alone by the sea wall, listening to the waves. For months, she had carried guilt, grief, and secrets. Now she carried something lighter, purpose. Behind her, Adrian's voice called softly, "You should rest." She turned, smiling faintly. "I will, but not yet. There's still more to fight for." The ocean shimmered beneath the moonlight, endless and alive. For the first time, Raven Ridge felt like home. Years passed, and Raven Ridge no longer looked like the house of ghosts it once was. The windows stayed open now, letting in the sea air. Laughter drifted through its halls where silence used to reign. The ocean below no longer sounded like grief. It sounded like life. Mira Cole had grown into a confident young woman, 17 now, her gray eyes bright with the light that once seemed impossible. Her story had traveled far beyond the cliffs of Oregon, inspiring others who had been silenced by fear. That morning, she stood before an easel in her sunlit studio, the walls covered with her paintings, oceans, lighthouses, faces half in shadow, half in glow. Each canvas carried a piece of her journey. Her favorite hung in the center, a small girl reaching for a beam of light, while two figures stood behind her, one in a dark suit, one in a blue uniform. Beneath it, she had written in gold paint, "The day I saw." Amara Blake entered quietly, still wearing the same calm grace she had when she first walked into this house all those years ago. Her hair had silver at the edges now, but her voice was warm as ever. "You've filled this place with color," she said. Mira smiled. "You filled it first." Downstairs, Adrian was arranging papers for a guest list. The City Museum had invited Mira to host her first public art exhibition. The invitation read, "From Darkness to Light. The Vision of Mira Cole." That evening, they would attend together, not as victims of the past, but as proof that truth could heal what lies once destroyed. When they arrived, the gallery buzzed with people, artists, reporters, families who had once followed the Cole Foundation scandal. Cameras flashed, and Mira greeted everyone with quiet confidence. Near the center of the exhibit, she stopped at her favorite painting and turned to speak. "People often ask me," she began, "what it felt like to see light for the first time." The room fell silent. "I used to think sight came from your eyes, but I learned it begins in your heart. Because before I saw the world, someone saw me." Her gaze found Amara in the crowd. "She taught me what light means, courage, truth, and love that doesn't quit." Applause filled the room, echoing like waves against the shore. Adrian stood beside Amara, his eyes wet. "You gave her more than vision," he whispered. "You gave her life." Amara smiled softly. "No, she found it herself. I just turned her toward it." Later that night, when the gallery emptied, the three of them stood together before the final canvas. A glowing lighthouse on a cliff, its beams stretching across a calm sea. Underneath it, Mira had painted one line: "Light wins." Adrian placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You've changed the world, sweetheart." Mira leaned against him. "We did." She turned to Amara. "You're coming with me tomorrow, right?" "They want me to talk to the children's hospital." "Of course," Amara said. "We'll tell them that hope isn't something you wait for, it's something you build." As they left the gallery, the night air was cool and clear. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 small stars. A reporter called out, "Mira, what's next for you?" She turned, smiling, her voice steady. "To keep painting the light." Back at Raven Ridge, the ocean glowed beneath the moon. The lighthouse's beam swept across the cliffs, just as it always had, touching the house that once hid too many secrets. And as the story ended where it began, a new one quietly started. The tale of a girl who had learned to see, a father who learned to believe, and a woman who proved that even in the darkest places, the light never gives up.